David Leonard Wood, A Shadow of Doubt. The clock is ticking. March 13th. A date etched in stone, or so it seems. But what if the stone is cracked? What if the truth, buried for decades, is about to surface? This is the story of David Leonard Wood and the desperate fight to save him from execution. David Leonard Wood, convicted of the brutal murders of 6 young women in El Paso, Texas, back in 1987, is scheduled to die. His attorney, Gregory Wiercioch, is racing against time, filing last-ditch appeals in both state and federal courts. The stakes are impossibly high. Wood has languished on death row longer than any other Texas inmate before facing execution. He would also be the 3rd oldest person executed by the state. Is this justice, or a rush to judgment fueled by years of unanswered questions? Gregory Wiercioch, Wood's attorney, is adamant. His client is innocent. He argues that Wood received shockingly ineffective legal representation during his 1992 trial. This isn't just a technicality, it's a fundamental challenge to the very foundation of the conviction. Wiercioch believes the original trial was a travesty, a rush to judgment based on flawed evidence and compromised testimony. He's fighting to expose the cracks in the prosecution's case, hoping to finally bring the truth to light. The prosecution's case rested heavily on the testimony of jailhouse informants. Wiercioch argues that this testimony was unreliable, tainted by self-interest and potential coercion. Can a man's life truly hang on the words of those seeking to benefit from his demise? New evidence has emerged in the form of a declaration from a fellow inmate, George Hall. Hall claims that the informants had access to police files related to the case. This revelation casts a dark shadow on the integrity of the entire investigation. Hall alleges that the informants essentially confirmed Wood's supposed confession based on information gleaned directly from those files. If true, this would completely undermine the credibility of their testimony. It suggests a manufactured narrative, not a genuine confession. There are also troubling inconsistencies in the prosecution's case. Evidence suggests Wood's truck was in a salvage yard during the time the women disappeared. This raises serious questions about his ability to commit the crimes as alleged. Even more damning, a police report indicates that Wood was under surveillance when 2 of the victims vanished. How could he have been responsible for their disappearances if he was being actively watched by law enforcement? The state of Texas remains steadfast in its conviction of Wood's guilt. They argue that these last-minute appeals are nothing more than a desperate attempt to delay the inevitable. They are vehemently opposing any further DNA testing of the evidence. The state claims that Wood has presented no legitimate reason to delay his execution. They insist that the families of the victims deserve justice, and that justice demands Wood's execution. But what if that justice is based on a lie? The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals has repeatedly rejected Wood's previous appeals. They have even criticized Wiercioch for what they perceive as piecemeal litigation and delay. The court seems determined to see this case closed. Wiercioch, however, remains hopeful that the new evidence and the presence of new judges on the court will lead to a different outcome. He believes that a fresh perspective is crucial to uncovering the truth. The court initially declined to consider the appeal due to its length. However, an amended appeal was filed within the prescribed length limits, forcing the court to address the substance of the claims. The legal battle has been a relentless uphill climb. The U.S. Supreme Court has already turned down an appeal in this case. A federal judge in Austin also rejected an appeal, as did the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. These repeated denials paint a grim picture for Wood's chances of survival. But Wiercioch refuses to give up, clinging to the hope that somewhere, someone will listen to the evidence. Wiercioch lays the blame for the lack of DNA testing squarely at the feet of the Attorney General's office. He believes they are actively obstructing the pursuit of truth by opposing the testing. He is convinced that DNA testing would definitively prove Wood's innocence. But the state seems unwilling to take that risk, perhaps fearing what the results might reveal. The Court of Criminal Appeals has ruled that Wiercioch's requests for DNA testing were simply a tactic for delay. This accusation stings, but Wiercioch maintains that his only goal is to ensure justice is served. Between 2010 and 2017, Wiercioch filed 6 separate DNA testing requests. Each one was met with resistance and ultimately denied. The fight for DNA testing has been a long and arduous one. Initial DNA testing of blood samples taken from the crime scenes was either inconclusive or excluded Wood as a possible contributor. This raises serious doubts about his involvement in the murders. Despite these initial results, further testing requests were rejected by a judge and upheld by the Court of Criminal Appeals. the door to scientific truth seems firmly shut. The 1992 trial was moved to Dallas due to extensive pretrial publicity in El Paso. This highlights the intense public interest and potential bias surrounding the case. Judge Peter Pica Jr. handed down the death penalty, sealing Wood's fate. But the legal complexities didn't end there. Burt Richardson was initially appointed to hear appeals in the case. He was later elected to the Court of Criminal Appeals, creating a potential conflict of interest. Jaime Esparza briefly represented Wood, creating further complications for the district attorney's office. The legal landscape surrounding this case is a minefield of potential conflicts. Due to these conflicts, courts appointed district attorneys pro tempore to handle the appeals. This unusual step underscores the sensitive nature of the case and the potential for bias. Wiercioch is urging the current district attorney, James Montoya, to reclaim the case and conduct a thorough review. He believes Montoya has the power to right a potential wrong. However, Montoya has rebuffed these efforts, refusing to even discuss the idea. He seems content to leave the case in the hands of special prosecutors. Montoya argues that the case is best handled by special prosecutors due to the existing conflicts of interest. He also cites the court rulings denying additional DNA testing as justification for his inaction. Wiercioch has publicly criticized Montoya's lack of courage, accusing him of shirking his responsibility to ensure justice is served. The tension between the two attorneys is palpable. The latest appeal hinges on two key claims. David Leonard Wood is innocent, and he received ineffective legal representation during his trial. These are not minor technicalities. They are fundamental challenges to the validity of the conviction. If either of these claims holds merit, Wood's execution would be a grave miscarriage of justice. The stakes are impossibly high. Wiercioch is launching a full frontal assault on the testimony of the jailhouse snitches who testified against Wood. He argues that their testimony was inherently unreliable and motivated by self-interest. These informants had clear incentives to lie, including the promise of sentence reductions and access to rewards. Can their words truly be trusted? The declaration from George Hall is a game-changer. Hall's claim that police gave files to informants to review casts a dark shadow on the entire prosecution. Hall alleges that the informants confirmed Wood's confession only after reviewing the police files. This suggests a manufactured narrative, not a genuine admission of guilt. Wiercioch is presenting what he calls newly discovered evidence that casts further doubt on Wood's guilt. This evidence includes the fact that Wood's truck was in a salvage yard during the time the women disappeared. The police report showing Wood under surveillance when two of the victims disappeared is also crucial. How could he have committed the crimes if he was being actively watched? Wiercioch also points to misleading testimony from an expert witness regarding fibers found at the crime scenes. He argues that this testimony was used to unfairly implicate Wood. Finally, witnesses claim to have seen one of the victims months after the prosecutor's timeline of her disappearance. This directly contradicts the prosecution's narrative. The motion for a stay of execution includes a sworn affidavit from Dolph Quijano Jr., one of Wood's trial lawyers. Quijano admits that prosecutors never provided him with the surveillance report showing Wood under surveillance. Quijano acknowledges that he was aware of the evidence regarding Wood's truck being in a salvage yard, but he failed to use it in his defense. This is a stunning admission of negligence. Quijano admits that there was no strategic reason for not using this evidence. He simply failed to do his job, potentially costing Wood his life. Wiercioch defends the timing of his appeal, claiming that he needed to exhaust the fight for DNA testing first. He argues that the Attorney General's office deliberately delayed the DNA testing process. He believes that the DNA evidence is crucial to proving Wood's innocence, and he was determined to pursue that avenue before raising other issues. Wiercioch acknowledges the past criticism he has received from the Court of Criminal Appeals. He is aware that he faces an uphill battle. However, he hopes that the presence of new judges on the court will lead to a more thorough and impartial review of the case. He believes that a fresh perspective is essential to uncovering the truth. Conclusion and call to action. The case of David Leonard Wood is a chilling reminder that the pursuit of justice is never truly over. The questions surrounding his conviction, the questionable testimony, and the suppressed evidence demand a closer look. We urge you to delve deeper into this case. Research the facts, examine the evidence, and form your own informed opinion. Share this video, spread awareness, and demand transparency from our justice system. Visit the Innocence Project website to learn how you can support wrongfully convicted individuals and advocate for a more just legal system. The time to act is now.